Traveling to the Ming Dynasty and becoming the fourth son of Zhu Biao, Zhu Yunwen, the younger brother of Emperor Jianwen, is this the rhythm destined to be imprisoned for life in the future? He was determined to change his fate, went to great lengths to win the favor of Zhu Yuanzhang and break the deadlock. The court was filled with old foxes, each one more cunning than the other. Fortunately, he was familiar with history and could make predictions first. He also saw the advantages and disadvantages of many systems in the Ming Dynasty very clearly. Yao Guangxiao. I have never seen such a wicked person before. Zhu Di. With him around, why am I still fighting for the world? Ma Sanbao. As a gesture of gratitude, I will set sail to sea and restore the power of the Ming Dynasty. Zhu Yuanzhang. Heaven will not disappoint us. We have brought this son to our old Zhu family. It will be a great day. Zhu Yunwen wanted Daming to be at the forefront of the times and become the first empire that never sets sun. He reformed the system, allowing the people of the Ming Dynasty to enjoy the benefits brought by the prosperity of the empire. Great achievements should start from overseeing the country at the age of 7. Novel keyword. I am only 7 years old, Lao Zhu, do you want me to supervise the country? No pop-ups, I'm only 7 years old. Lao Zhu, do you want me to supervise the country? Download the complete set of TXT. I am only 7 years old. Old Zhu, do you want me to supervise the country? Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. I want to be the worst prince. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. I want to be the worst prince. In the 25th year of the Hongwu reign, on April 25th, Nanjing City. In April, the snow drifted and the atmosphere of sadness enveloped the entire eastern palace. One by one, the servants hurriedly walked and looked sad. The world in front of me gradually becomes clear from blurriness. He found himself in an antique room. There is a rosewood frame next to the carved window, on which a small copper fire stick burns incense, emitting a faint fragrance. Turning my gaze again, I saw intricate and luxurious wooden chairs carved, screen paintings with profound artistic conception, and quaint and exquisite lampshades. Where am I? Rubbing his groggy head, murmuring to himself. Lowering his head, a pair of small hands from a 7 or 8-year-old child came into view. What situation? With a buzzing sound in my mind, I took 3 steps into at the bronze mirror next to the runway. Is this me? He looked at himself in the mirror incredulously. In the mirror is a little boy wearing fancy clothes, only 7 or 8 years old. Born white and pure, with clear eyebrows and beautiful eyes. At a young age, there is a faint aura that is different from that of ordinary children. Seems like someone who has been in high positions for a long time. Ah! Suddenly, I felt an abnormal headache. Then, a mountain and sea of memories flooded in. After a long while, I finally understood. It turns out he has traveled through time. Now is the 25th year of Hongwu. And his identity is Zhu Yunwen, the 4th son of the Crown Prince Zhu Biao of the Ming Dynasty. This year, he was 7 years old. Although he had thought about traveling countless times in his past life, when it really happened, he couldn't accept it for a moment. A brand new world. A brand new identity. He sat there without saying a word for a long time. Time passes, and I don't know how long it has been. He repeatedly confirmed that it was really a time travel, and he could never go back to the past. Finally, I gradually accepted my new identity. Fortunately, it's not bad, at least it's a great-grandson. Wait, the 25th year of Hongwu. Zhu Yunxian suddenly seemed to remember something. In the 25th year of the Hongwu reign, April 25th, wasn't it exactly the day of the death of Crown Prince Zhu Biao? Crown Prince Zhu Biao recently fell ill and his health has been deteriorating day by day, and today this idea had just surfaced, without giving him too much time to think, when the sound of pushing the door came from behind. Zhu Yunwen turned around and saw a servant with a sorrowful face, suppressing his crying and kneeling on the ground, saying, "Fourth Crown Prince, it's not good. His Highness, he has gone to the funeral." A layer of goosebumps suddenly appeared on Zhu Yunwen's body. Is this considered the beginning? He has just traveled here, so naturally there is not much controversy about the death of Lao Zhu. But to avoid arousing suspicion, he pretended to be shocked and said, You dare to talk nonsense, be careful that I ask father to chop off your head." Zhu Yunwen recalled seeing the children who had lost their loved ones in their past lives. He deliberately furrowed his brow, letting tears swirl in his eyes, making himself look as if he was truly heartbroken. Although traveling through this kind of thing cannot be detected by anyone. But if the behavior is abnormal, it is possible to receive some unfavorable, special treatment, in feudal society. He has only just arrived in this world and cannot understand the situation. He cannot act recklessly. His Highness the Fourth Prince, the villain did not lie. The servant cried, "Your Highness the Crown Prince did indeed have a funeral in the front hall." Upon hearing this, Zhu Yunwen ignored the servants and immediately ran towards the front hall. It's going to be chaotic now. If you don't feel nervous, it's a lie. In April of the 25th year of the Hongwu reign, Zhu Biao passed away due to illness. Later, Zhu Yuanzhang appointed Zhu Yunwen, the second son of Zhu Biao, as the crown prince. 6 years later, Zhu Yuanzhang passed away due to illness. Zhu Yunwen ascended the throne with the reign title Jianwen. In the 4th year of Jianwen, Zhu Di, the fourth son of Zhu Yuanzhang, rebelled and attacked Nanjing city. The whereabouts of Zhu Yunwen are unknown. And Zhu Yunwen was also demoted to a commoner and imprisoned in Fengyang. From then on, he spent his life in captivity. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! I originally thought that becoming a prince through time travel could lead a few good days and enjoy the happiness of being a person. But I didn't expect it to be much worse than ordinary people. No, I can't let such a thing happen. I want to change. Zhu Yunwen murmured to himself. As a traveler, he knows the direction of everything's development. However, forcibly changing the trajectory of history is not an easy task. Moreover, he is only a 7-year-old child now. Now that Zhu Biao has died, the seeds of the Jingnan campaign have quietly been planted. Sprouting, growing, it's just a matter of time. You must do something before everything happens. Through a journey, he did not want to be demoted to a commoner, nor did he want to abandon his luxurious lifestyle, wealth, and status, and spend his entire life in prison. We cannot let Zhu Yunwen become the crown prince. This idea suddenly surged in Zhu Yunwen's heart. Zhu Yunwen is a guy who can't support the wall with mud. The reason why Zhu Yuanzhang appointed him as the crown prince is largely due to his affection for Zhu Biao. Allowing him to become the crown prince to inherit the throne would not be able to control the courtiers, intimidate the feudal lords, and sooner or later cause trouble. So, go argue on your own. No way. Zhu Yunxian quickly rejected this idea. Firstly, he is only 7 years old now and has no power or influence. How can he compete with others? Secondly, in terms of identity. The eldest brother Zhu Xionying passed away at the age of 8, and the second brother Zhu Yunwen was the eldest. Not to mention the third brother Zhu Yunwen, who was born to Empress Chang. Since ancient times, it has been the practice of appointing legitimate officials but not commoners, and appointing elders but not virtuous individuals. Even if he can fight against Zhu Yunwen of the Crown Prince's mansion, how can he fight against those supporters of the rules in the court? How do you fight against King Yan Zhu Di again? I can't fight at all. If Zhu Yunwen is an adult now, he might give it a try. But a 7-year-old child, it's better to hide one's sight and keep it hidden. Let's hold on for a while before we speak. Besides, being the emperor of the Ming Dynasty is very tiring. Thousands of miles of rivers and mountains carry a heavy burden. Wake up and sleep every day, review memorials, and engage in intellectual battles with ministers. Where is the leisurely prince comfortable? Enjoyment is the essence of life. Lying flat is the most beautiful pursuit in life. A snowflake fell on his cheek, and the cool feeling made Zhu Yunxian slightly sober. The best way to change one's destiny at the moment is to make the king of Yen the crown prince. As soon as this idea came out, it was like a ivy, instantly spreading to every corner of my heart. Yes. Prince Yen Zhu Di, as long as he becomes the crown prince, he can change everything. Zhu Yunwen walked and thought as he walked. Making Zhu Di the crown prince is a win-win situation for him. Firstly, it can ensure safety. If Zhu Di became the crown prince and successfully inherited the throne, there would be no subsequent Jingnan campaign. If there were no incidents of rebellion involving uncles and nephews tearing their faces apart, then Zhu Di would have imprisoned him. It's unnecessary to have a bad reputation for no reason. Zhu Di would definitely be willing to raise an idle prince. Secondly, Zhu Yunwen was not interested in becoming an emperor. When the emperor works tirelessly, why bother? Support Zhu Di to rise to power, let him do those dirty and tiring jobs, and be a carefree prince myself. Isn't it good to travel to the mountains and water every day, enjoying the wind, flowers, snow, and moon? It's so fragrant. However, this process is destined not to be too easy. Everyone knows that among his many children, Zhu Yuanzhang favored Zhu Biao. Love the house and the crow. Zhu Biao has died, and it is natural for Zhu Yuanzhang to appoint his son. Not to mention the matter of establishing a crown prince, which involves the foundation of the country, is it insignificant? It is definitely not an easy task to make old Zhu appoint Zhu Di as the crown prince. And you can't act too hastily, otherwise Zhu Yuanzhang will doubt your own carelessness, and it will be even more difficult to handle things in the future. There is nothing difficult in the world, only afraid of those who have a heart. There is nothing difficult in the world, only afraid of those who have a heart. Zhu Yunxian said to himself time and time again. Firmly determined. Anyway, knowing the development of the situation, all he has to do is hold on and wait for the opportunity to push the boat with ease. With this thought in mind, Zhu Yunxian unknowingly arrived at the front hall. Zhu Biao lay quietly on the lounge chair, with his eyes closed. His handsome face had no expression, as if he had fallen asleep. Beside Zhu Biao, his mother Lv Shi was holding Zhu Yunwen, tears streaming down her face. My dear. Seeing Zhu Yunwen coming, Lv Shi cried even harder, tears almost overflowing from her eyes. Mother. Zhu Yunxian squeezed her throat hard, making her voice sound extremely dry. Although he doesn't have much emotional attachment to his cheap parents, he is still a relative. Blood is thicker than water, and Zhu Yunwen's heart couldn't help but feel a slight sourness. He cautiously walked forward and reached out his little hand to gently wipe away the tears on his mother's face, saying, Mother. Don't cry, don't cry. When speaking, tears rolled in Zhu Yunwen's eyes. Sure. Lv Shi couldn't help but hold him in her arms and burst into tears. Zhu Yunxian knew that in order to make what he said carry weight, the more it was at this moment, the more he needed to remain calm. But we cannot remain too calm, after all, we are just a child. Thinking of this, Zhu Yunxian whispered with a crying voice, Mom, don't cry, I'll protect you from now on. At this moment, hurried footsteps suddenly came from outside the door. Boss, boss. A voice as old as a dragon entered his ear. See your majesty. See your majesty. Zhu Yunwen's heart moved, and Zhu Yuanzhang came. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. The establishment of a reserve. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. The establishment of a reserve. Zhu Yunwen was held by his mother and could only half turn his head, quietly glancing behind him. A chubby old man in an imperial robe walked trembling and trembling. My temples have grown white hair, and there are traces of time hanging on my face. Like an old dragon. The eyes that should have been bright and lively are now filled with sadness and coolness. Zhu Yuanzhang ignored the worship of others. Just walking step by step with red eyes. Zhu Yunwen watched silently. Undoubtedly Zhu Yuanzhang, despite his old age and the unbearable sadness of his favorite son's death, he still carries a majestic aura that is too high to be forced into view. Zhu Yuanzhang walked towards him step by step, as if a wave of pressure was coming towards him. Boss. He choked up and spoke in a dry voice, as if he had aged several decades in an instant. Zhu Yunwen couldn't help but sigh in his heart, the emperor is also human. There will also be human emotions. White-haired people give black-haired people away. How many people can bear it? He also understood that this was not the right time for him to speak, so he stood silently next to his mother Elvisha. The tears in my eyes were still swirling, but they did not fall. He was secretly observing Zhu Yuanzhang. The whole royal mansion was filled with cries, making one's heart break. Zhu Yuanzhang didn't cry, he just stood there in a daze, his gaze deeply fixed on the already cold Zhu Biao. He opened his mouth forcefully, but still remained silent. Zhu Yunwen shook his head secretly in his heart, it seemed that old Zhu was too sad to speak. At this moment, he suddenly noticed that Zhu Yuanzhang was holding his chest in pain, as if unable to breathe. Grandpa Huang. Zhu Yunxian tried to shout. Before he could continue speaking, Zhu Yuanzhang suddenly fell to the ground with a loud bang, unconscious. Your Majesty! Your Majesty! Everyone was shocked and pale, and someone quickly shouted, go and invite the imperial physician. The entire front hall was in chaos in an instant. Zhu Yunwen did not move, but quietly watched everything, watching the figures running non-stop in front of him one by one. He understands that Zhu Yuanzhang is fine. The day before Zhu Yuanzhang's death is still far away. Lao Zhu is only feeling excessively sad now, with a momentary anger attacking his heart. Bedroom. Zhu Yunxian looked at Zhu Yuanzhang lying in bed. Mother LV, brother Zhu Yunwen, and a group of servants are also guarding here carefully. After Zhu Yuanzhang fainted just now, everyone helped him to Zhu Biao's previous bedroom. It took a long time for him to slowly wake up, but his mental state was still not very good, as if he had not recovered from the blow of losing his son. Your Majesty, the white-bearded physician advised cautiously from the side, Your Majesty fainted because of the excessive grief caused by His Highness the Crown Prince. I kindly request Your Majesty to take care of the dragon's body and observe good times. Zhu Yuanzhang leaned against the back of the bed, his eyelids folded downwards, and did not directly answer the imperial physician's words. Everyone just watched anxiously. The entire bedroom was quiet without a single sound. It is said that the emperor is majestic and accompanies the emperor like a tiger. Indeed, that's true. Zhu Yunwen sighed inwardly and looked carefully at Zhu Yuanzhang with his head down. After a while, Zhu Yuanzhang spoke in a deep voice and said, let's all go down. I want to stay alone for a while. The voice was hoarse and cracked, making one's heart tremble. When everyone received the order, they all said yes and then cautiously retreated back. Including Zhu Yunwen and Elvisha. Zhu Yunwen did not move. He knows very well that now is a good opportunity and he absolutely cannot leave. Shower, came the urging voice of his mother Elvisha behind him. What's wrong with you? Go out with your mother and let Grandpa Huang. Mother, Zhu Yunwen choked up and said, I don't want to leave. Now even Zhu Yuanzhang was stunned for a moment and his gaze swept over. Zhu Yunwen lowered his head, looked at his toes, and whispered, Dad has left. I'm afraid Grandpa Huang will also leave me. I want to accompany Grandpa Huang. Hiss, as expected by Zhu Yunxian, just as he finished speaking, a sound of air conditioning was heard. The room instantly became unusually quiet. Zhu Yungui's words are like cursing Zhu Yuanzhang. Lu quickly rushed over and slapped Zhu Yungui's back with force, scolding him, "Don't talk nonsense." Zhu Yungui was taken and stumbled forward a step. Lu Shi quickly rushed to Zhu Yuanzhang and said, "Your Majesty, your son is still young and not sensible. Your Majesty, don't blame him." Zhu Yungui saw that it was almost time, and he took advantage of the momentum of stumbling forward and grabbed Zhu Yuanzhang's hand. "Grandpa Huang." He lifted his head and looked at Zhu Yuanzhang with teary eyes, holding onto his hand tightly. Zhu Yuanzhang's eyes twitched slightly, and then he said wearily, "Tong Yen Wuji, let's all step back and stay." "Your Majesty." Lu Shi said, "Your Majesty, he is still young and afraid." "I know, step back." Zhu Yuanzhang waved his hand wearily. Lu's heart relaxed slightly, and he retreated with Zhu Yunwen and a group of servants. After everyone left, there were only grandparents and grandchildren left in the room. Zhu Yungui was still holding Zhu Yuanzhang's hand. "Grandpa Huang, will you leave me?" he asked weakly, bowing his head. The voice is sad, and the eyes are filled with tears. "I don't know." Zhu Yuanzhang's voice came into his ear and he said, "My son, Grandpa Huang asked you something, and you must answer it honestly." Zhu Yuanzhang's voice made Zhu Yungui's heart slightly move. Perhaps he acted too much and was noticed. But the next moment, Zhu Yuanzhang's words dispelled his concerns. "Did your mother teach you what you said earlier?" His heart tightened. Although he didn't look, he understood that Zhu Yuanzhang's gaze must be fixed on him at this moment. It seems that old Zhu is really not easy to fool. My cheap old son Zhu Biao was the current crown prince, and after Zhu Yuanzhang returned to heaven, the throne belonged to Zhu Biao. But now, Zhu Biao has passed away unexpectedly. After Zhu Biao's death, there were actually several options to take over the throne. One is to choose the son of Zhu Yuanzhang, who will be his second uncle, Prince Qin Zhu Xiu, in the order of legitimate elder. But Zhu Xiu's temperament is obviously not suitable. Not long ago, he was punished for making a mistake. The third son, Prince Qin Zhu Jian, had a wild and unrestrained nature, and was not the best candidate. Both of them are capricious and reckless, and Lao Zhu would never hand over the country to them. If it were to establish a virtuous person, the first recommendation would be the fourth prince of Yan, Zhu Di. But this goes against the eldest son inheritance system. In feudal dynasties, in order to avoid cohabitation and infighting, it was customary to establish a leader rather than a virtuous one. After all, the eldest son is not controversial, while virtuous is difficult to define. In addition, it is to select the grandson of Zhu Yuanzhang. Changsun Zhu Xionying is the child of Chang Shi and Zhu Biao, the daughter of Chang Yuchen. Chang was a legitimate crown princess, but she had already passed away. And Zhu Yunxian and Zhu Yunwen were the sons of the second consort, the Lu family, and could only be considered illegitimate. If Zhu Xionying is still alive, then he is the undisputed first choice. Unfortunately, this guy died early at the age of 8. If one were to follow the throne again, it would be to establish the second son of the Chang family. Zhu Yungui. After all, since ancient times, standing tall does not stand young, standing legitimate does not stand illegitimate. But Zhu Yungui understood that Zhu Yuanzhang also had his concerns. Zhu Yungui had a peaceful personality. In history, Zhu Yuanzhang was very worried that he would not be able to control his relatives such as Lan Yu, so he issued an order to help Lady LV become the Empress Dowager. As a result, Zhu Yunwen became the legitimate eldest son and naturally became the crown prince. At this moment, Zhu Yuanzhang clearly suspected that the LV family was about to start competing for the position of crown prince for his son, which is why he asked this question. With his mind spinning, Zhu Yunxian cleared his thoughts and breathed a slight sigh of relief. He shook his head and said, "It wasn't my mother who taught me." Zhu Yunwen lifted his head to tears, looked at Zhu Yuanzhang with a hint of innocence, and asked, "Why does Grandpa think so?" Zhu Yuanzhang's expression softened and he said, "You still don't understand what's up to you, sir." Zhu Yunwen shook his head and said stubbornly, "Grandpa Huang, I heard that the day a boy's father left was the day he grew up, and his son had already grown up. Grandpa, are you thinking about establishing a crown prince?" Zhu Yunxian chose to have a direct showdown. After all, who is old Zhu? In front of him, be careful how long can you hide it. It's better to just click on it. Sure enough, upon hearing Zhu Yunxuan's words, Zhu Yuanzhang was slightly taken aback. No matter how sad he is, he still needs to think for the sake of the Ming Dynasty. If you are already old this year, this matter cannot be delayed. When Zhu Biao was seriously ill, he was already considering this issue. He asked insightfully, "Hooer, do you think it's appropriate for the emperor to appoint someone as the crown prince?" Under the gaze of Zhu Yuanzhang, Zhu Yunwen felt a piercing sensation on his back, almost unable to breathe. But he understood that the more it was at this moment, the less one could show fear. Facing Zhu Yuanzhang's gaze, Zhu Yunwen firmly said, "Grandpa Hui, I think fourth uncle Yan Wang is the most suitable." End of this chapter. Chapter 3. The Best Weapons for Children. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. The Best Weapons for Children. Upon hearing this answer, Zhu Yuanzhang's pupils suddenly moved. This was completely beyond his expectations. "Hooer, why do you think your fourth uncle is suitable?" Zhu Yuanzhang reached out his hand and picked up Zhu Yunwen in his arms. Zhu Yunwen rubbed against Zhu Yuanzhang's arms like a spoiled child, without rushing to explain the reason. He said childishly, "Anyway, I think fourth uncle is suitable." The old gasp of Zhu Yuanzhang could be heard in his ear, but it seemed to have regained a bit of his vitality, unlike his previously listless voice. "Can you tell me why?" Zhu Yunwen tilted his head, thought for a moment, and said in a childish voice. "Grandpa Huang, the current candidates for crown prince are nothing more than second uncle, fourth uncle, second brother, third brother, right?" After saying these words, Zhu Yunxian could clearly feel that Zhu Yuanzhang's body stiffened slightly. His heart lifted in an instant. "Keep talking," said Zhu Yuanzhang's aged voice. Due to being held by Zhu Yuanzhang, the expression on old Zhu's face could not be seen, and Zhu Yunxian did not know what he was thinking at the moment. "Did you hit his mark?" Zhu Yungui's mind was spinning and it was not easy to observe carefully, so he gritted his head and continued speaking. "Second uncle is not very steady in his actions. He was just punished by the emperor a while ago, and I don't think it's appropriate. Besides, I think second uncle is not as good as fourth uncle." Zhu Yunxian tried to make her tone more relatable to children. A saying that second uncle is not as powerful as fourth uncle may seem unreasonable, but in reality, it is exactly what he should say at his age. Sure enough, upon hearing Zhu Yunxuan's words, even Zhu Yuanzhang, who had just experienced the pain of losing his son, showed a faint smile. Zhu Yunxian felt that Zhu Yuanzhang was lifting his body up again, as if he had regained some strength. "So, what's next?" Zhu Yuanzhang asked again, his voice sounded as if it had a hint of meaning and seemed very casual. "Nothing at all." Zhu Yunwen deliberately thought for a moment and said, "My second brother's personality is too peaceful. Currently, my Ming Dynasty has only been established for more than 20 years. What's going on for over 20 years? Zhu Yuanzhang asked, his voice carrying a hint of imperceptible excitement. Zhu Yunxian said, "Of course there are many founding heroes. Since ancient times, those founding heroes in history have been extremely powerful. Second brother's personality, I'm afraid he can't suppress them, right? If they bully him then it won't be good. Continue speaking." Zhu Yuanzhang's voice trembled slightly. Zhu Yunxian breathed a slight sigh of relief and knew he was right. Beside Lao Zhu, he always had a feeling of accompanying him like a tiger. Even though he is Lao Zhu's biological grandson, Lao Zhu has always loved his son very much. But the majesty of the ninth five sovereigns that flowed out unintentionally still made him feel nervous. He steadied his mind and said childishly, "Third brother, although it's barely possible, sometimes it's two." At this point, Zhu Yunwen reached out his small hand and rubbed his head in frustration. "What's that word called? Look at the front and be afraid of the back." Zhu Yuanzhang chuckled and said, looking ahead and looking back. "Yes." Zhu Yunwen patted his forehead and said, "It's just looking forward and backward." He secretly praised his acting skills while continuing to say, "My dad has said many times that when my brother is asked to do something, he shouldn't be too forward-thinking and backward-thinking. But I always can't remember this word." "It's not too late to remember now," Zhu Yuanzhang said. "Hooer, go on and talk about why your fourth uncle is suitable for being a crown prince." "Because fourth uncle is amazing," Zhu Yunxian said without thinking. After a pause, he said again, "Grandpa, look at me. Although fourth uncle doesn't have much education, he still has a righteous heart. I heard a few days ago that he also punished a bully who bullied the people. Also, fourth uncle can win battles. My Ming Dynasty was conquered by my grandfather, but now the world is still unclear and there are many hidden dangers. It would be best if fourth uncle could win a battle like this, the crown prince. Although I heard from my father that in ancient times, the establishment of a crown prince was based on the principle of standing tall but not wise, but now my father has gone. Second and third uncles are not suitable. Also, I heard people say that fourth uncle is the most like Grandpa Huang." You said it very well." Zhu Yunxian felt that Zhu Yuanzhang had let go of him, so he stood on the ground, his eyes fixed on Zhu Yuanzhang. In Zhu Yuanzhang's already slightly cloudy eyes, he could not see any emotions. "Grandfather." Feeling the gaze of Zhu Yuanzhang sweeping over, Zhu Yunwen couldn't help but feel a little tense all over. Zhu Yuanzhang looked at Zhu Yunxian with profound meaning and asked softly, "Who taught you those words just now?" "Grandpa Huang, no one taught me. It's just that when my dad was sick, I chatted with him a bit, and I found out." Zhu Yunxian pushed all of this onto Zhu Biao. "Anyway, Qin Laozi has already died, so there is no evidence to prove his death. Old Zhu couldn't have run to ask Zhu Biao. Did your father talk to you about the establishment of a crown prince?" Zhu Yuanzhang asked incredulously. "Well, Dad still told me not to tell anyone," Zhu Yunwen whispered. "Ah." Zhu Yuanzhang let out a long sigh and murmured, "Boss, did you already know?" Seeing that the corners of Zhu Yuanzhang's eyes were slightly moist, Zhu Yunxian quickly reached out his small hand and helped him wipe away his tears. "Grandpa Huang, what do you think Daddy already knew?" "It's nothing," Zhu Yuanzhang shook his head and shifted his gaze to Zhu Yunwen. Seeing Zhu Yuanzhang staring at him all the time, Zhu Yunwen felt uneasy for a moment. What is Lao Zhu thinking? Shouldn't there have been some omission somewhere? Zhu Yunwen's heart was beating faster and faster, but he tried to control his face as much as possible to not show any fear. Zhu Yuanzhang slowly spoke, his eyes burning with flames. "Since your fourth uncle can be appointed as the crown prince, why can't you?" Zhu Yunwen was taken aback for a moment, not expecting Zhu Yuanzhang to ask this question. "It seems that the throne is not up to me, is it? However, upon closer examination, it is true that they are all second sons. Zhu Di can do it, so can he." However, Zhu Yunxian could clearly feel that Zhu Yuanzhang's words were not sincere. He is probing, and as for what to probe, only he probably knows. Zhu Yunwen couldn't help but have a layer of goosebumps on his body. Truly worthy of being the founding emperor. Zhu Yuanzhang's scheming is indeed very deep. Even when facing one's own grandson, a child who is only 7 or 8 years old, one should give it a try. Why can Zhu Di do it, but not himself? How should I answer this question? Zhu Yungui's palm couldn't help but shed a layer of fine sweat. If this question is not answered well, it is very likely to directly lose Zhu Yuanzhang's trust. It will be even more difficult to change everything when the time comes. What should I do? It's a long time, everything is just a blink of an eye. Zhu Yungui's brain was spinning rapidly, and at that moment, his remaining light suddenly noticed his small hand. In an instant, I was enlightened. Yeah. I'm a child now. How could a child have so much reason? The best weapon for children, of course, is tears. Thinking of this, Zhu Yunxian didn't hesitate at all and burst into tears. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Exploration, the clever old Zhu. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Exploration, the clever old Zhu Yungui cried very sadly, almost heart-wrenching. It's like trying to vent the grievances of my father's passing in an instant. Tears streamed down the corners of the eyes. Amidst the hazy tears in his eyes, Zhu Yunxian saw a flash of panic on Zhu Yuanzhang's aged face. He knew he had made the right bet. You are. Zhu Yuanzhang quickly took Zhu Yungui's hand and said, "Don't cry, why are you crying?" "Grandpa Huang, I." Zhu Yungui twitched and pursed his mouth, constantly saying, "I don't want to be the crown prince, I don't want to be the crown prince." The crown prince is the crown prince, who has to read many, many books. I see my father reading until late at night every day. And there are also very strict requirements, sir. And it's also very scary. Speaking of which, Zhu Yungui can showcase his acting skills as an Oscar-winning actor. He looked up at Zhu Yuanzhang with a pitiful expression, causing tears to fall to the ground. "Grandpa Huang, I don't want to work so hard, I don't want to read, I want to sleep in, I want to play." Zhu Yuanzhang was stunned. In his somewhat cloudy eyes, the sharp light softened for a moment. But the next second, it became even more fierce. "My dear, how could you be so lazy?" Zhu Yuanzhang's voice couldn't help but increase a bit. Zhu Yungui pretended to be scared and shrunk his neck, weakly saying, "Grandpa, I." "Ah, my dear." Zhu Yuanzhang said sternly, "Old Ji Fu Ting has 1,000 miles of ambition. Old Ma still has the ambition of Kunpeng. Why are you so playful at such a young age, without any ambition?" Zhu Yuanzhang's tone was very serious, but Zhu Yunxian could tell that his attitude had eased a lot. It seems that we have passed the level. Lao Zhu should not suspect that he has ulterior motives. Zhu Yunxian secretly breathed a sigh of relief. "I have read many movies and TV novels in my past life, but it is only when I face an emperor that I realize how much pressure there is. Even if this emperor is his biological grandfather. It seems that ancient people were not at all dumber than modern people." That's right. Any person who can be recorded in history, if placed in modern times, is a human spirit among the human spirits. Not to mention someone like Lao Zhu who started with a bowl and defeated the entire Ming Dynasty. For thousands of years in China, this person is the only one. If you say he's not strong, there probably weren't any strong people down there that day. After a moment's pause, Zhu Yungui continued, "Grandpa Huang, the Ming Dynasty was prosperous in culture and martial arts. There were hundreds of officials in the court and hundreds of workers in the people, each performing their own duties. Grandpa Huang is Bo Lu. Some people are willing to be 1,000-mile horses, while others just want to eat, drink, and have fun without worries. Isn't that good?" After speaking, Zhu Yungui blinked his eyes and looked at Zhu Yuanzhang so naively. "But you are a descendant of my Zhu family, how could you be so unmotivated?" Zhu Yuanzhang's gaze was somewhat distressing. Zhu Yunxian said, "Grandpa, you are the emperor of the true dragon, who overlooks the world. How could you care about your grandson's thoughts?" Zhu Yuanzhang's face darkened slightly and he said, "What's that called?" "We're your grandfather, why can't we care about your thoughts? Zhu Yunxian said, Grandpa, as the saying goes, the 9 sons born to dragons are different. Among your descendants, there are not a few who have ambitions. There are countless capable individuals, not lacking a single one. My dad became the crown prince and eventually left due to overwork and illness. I don't want to be like my dad. I just want to do nothing and be independent of the world, isn't that good? My dad said, life is alive, just want to have a clear conscience. I just want to be a person who is worthy and worry-free. His words were not only to deal with Lao Zhu, but also somewhat true. Lying flat is really comfortable. Ordinary people cannot truly lie flat because they have to support their families. But he is the imperial grandson. Lying down for a lifetime is not a problem at all. After speaking, Zhu Yunxian looked at Zhu Yuanzhang. His words left Zhu Yuanzhang speechless. Zhu Yuanzhang was stunned for a long time, his eyes flickering, and he didn't know what was on his mind. I didn't expect that at such a young age, you could live so transparently. After a while, Zhu Yuanzhang spoke hoarsely. His gaze was deep, as if recalling something. Shower, you really look like your big brother. Zhu Yunwen knew that Zhu Yuanzhang was referring to Zhu Xiongying, who died early at the age of 8. Zhu Xiongying is intelligent and clever. If he doesn't die, he is the best candidate for the crown prince. Can make Zhu Yuanzhang think of Zhu Xiongying at this moment. It seems that his behavior has touched a soft spot in his heart. Zhu Yunwen doesn't mind continuing to push the boat along with the current. He tried hard to show a hint of fear and whispered, Grandpa, you won't be sleeping anymore, will you? With a bitter smile on his face, Zhu Yuanzhang said in a low voice, No, don't worry, my son. Zhu Yunwen nodded heavily and said with a tearful tone, That's good, that's good. Dad has gone to sleep, and I want Grandpa to always be with me. Grandpa, you will, right? Zhu Yunwen once again held on to Zhu Yuanzhang's hand. Zhu Yuanzhang couldn't help but extend his hand and caress Zhu Yunwen's small brain. Ah! I can't believe that after half our lives as soldiers, we still need a child to comfort us. Grandpa Huang. Zhu Yunwen looked up at Zhu Yuanzhang and hesitated to speak. Zhu Yuanzhang sighed again and said, Shower, when your father's funeral is resolved, you can come to study with Grandpa Huang. Zhu Yunwen let out a thud in his heart. Even when communicating with Zhu Yuanzhang as his own grandson, one must be extremely careful. Zhu Yuanzhang wants to go to his side to study on his own. Is it because there is some purpose that cannot be achieved? Although Zhu Yunwen doesn't want to be overly concerned, the person in front of him is Zhu Yuanzhang. How can we not think too much about hair being hollow when pulled out? Everything he does may have a certain purpose. Grandpa Huang, Zhu Yunwen swallowed his saliva and asked with a gloomy expression, Why did you ask me to study in the palace? I heard that the gentleman in the palace is so fierce. Zhu Yuanzhang's mouth curved slightly and he said in a hoarse voice, aren't you going to accompany Grandpa Huang? Since that's the case, what's wrong with going to the palace to study? Zhu Yunwen let out a deep sigh in his heart. Isn't it a bit exaggerated? To be fair, staying by Zhu Yuanzhang's side all the time is not a good thing. Such a shrewd person may discover some flaws one day. However, on second thought, Zhu Yunxian realized that it didn't seem like a bad thing either. At least stay by Lao Zhu's side, you can know some of his thoughts, just be more careful. There is still an opportunity to persuade old Zhu to appoint Zhu Di as the crown prince. Besides, there are no other options now. Refusing Zhu Yuanzhang at this time will only make him distrust again. Thinking of this, Zhu Yunwen pretended to have a righteous and resolute attitude, as if he had turned his back to death and said, As long as you can accompany Grandpa Huang, be more aggressive, sir. End of this chapter. Chapter 5 LUS Request. Zhu Yunwen as the grandson. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 LUS Request. Zhu Yunwen as the grandson. In his past life, Zhu Yunxian had read many novels and films about historical travel. After traveling to the Ming Dynasty, ordinary people can easily manipulate the emperor in their hands. The emperor does whatever the protagonist says. Living like a fairy. But after actually dealing with Zhu Yuanzhang, Zhu Yunwen realized that those novels were all nonsense. Who is Zhu Yuanzhang, not to mention others? Being able to become the ruler of a country step by step from a beggar monk, his shrewdness far exceeds the imagination of ordinary people. And unlike most emperors in history, Zhu Yuanzhang climbed up step by step from the real grassroots, and he witnessed more human nature. With Lao Zhu's shrewdness, those intellectually disabled protagonists in the novel may not even survive for 3 days. Even if you rely on your status as a prince to save your life, there is probably no good outcome. Because Lao Zhu is too refined. Others have 800 intentions, but Lao Zhu probably has more than 80,000. Not to mention playing with the palms of their thighs, their careful thinking methods are not even suitable for giving old Zhu shoes. Just now, after a brief moment of contact, he had already calmly probed Zhu Yunxian several times. If it weren't for his early preparation, he might have already shown timidity. Zhu Yunwen also knew that not only Zhu Yuanzhang was so shrewd, but the people around him, including his own chief uncles, were all incredibly shrewd. Fortunately, Zhu Yunwen still has 2 advantages now. One is that they are young and childlike, and most people do not care too much about a child. I wouldn't even think of how complex a child's thoughts can be. Secondly, his status is quite good. As the son of Zhu Biao, old Zhu will definitely dote on him even though he loves his house and his daughter. Not to mention anything else, at least for the time being, safety is still guaranteed. Next, we need to take one step at a time and slowly start changing. Time flies, and in the blink of an eye, 40.9 days have already passed. The final 7 has passed. Zhu Biao's funeral has finally come to an end. Zhu Yunwen is going to the palace to study. During these days, he has also been quiet and behaved like an ordinary child. Early that morning, the weather was pleasant, and Zhu Yunwen was strolling alone in the yard when his mother Lao Zhu and second brother Zhu Yunwen called him over. When Zhu Yunwen arrived at the room, Lao Zhu and Zhu Yunwen were sitting there. "Shower, you're here." Lao Zhu smiled at Zhu Yunxian. Zhu Yunwen also smiled and said, "Fourth brother." Zhu Yunwen is already 15 years old this year and is quite handsome. At that stop, you will be a graceful young master. There is always a sense of pride between the eyebrows. Mother, second brother. After greeting, Zhu Yunwen sat aside. He knew that there must be something going on when Lu came to find him, and furthermore, the 8 achievements were related to Zhu Yunwen. Thinking of this, Zhu Yunxian was the first to ask, "Mom, call me over early in the morning." "What's up?" Lu first brought a few cakes to Zhu Yunxian and asked with concern, "Have you not eaten anything yet?" "Thank you, mother." Zhu Yunwen picked up a piece of cake and started eating it on his own. Lu sat next to Zhu Yunxian and asked softly, "Your son, are you going to the palace to study in the next few days?" Sure enough. Zhu Yunwen secretly thought to himself that he had guessed right. Lu Shi is indirectly attacking Zhu Yuanzhang's ideas. After all, the crown prince has not yet been established. Yes, Zhu Yunxian said with a smile while eating pastries. Grandpa Huang said not long ago that he asked me to prepare after the funeral and go to the palace to accompany him in his studies. Lu said, "Has Grandpa Huang told you anything?" Zhu Yunxian could see that Lv's face seemed to be filled with anticipation. He remained calm and pretended to think for a moment before saying, "I don't seem to say anything else except for reading." The expression on Lv's face changed several times before finally saying, "My dear, I came to see you this time. I still hope that you can help your second brother speak up, after all, you and Grandpa will often see each other in the future. Zhu Yungui's heart moved, but he did not answer. At this moment, Zhu Yunwen also approached and advised, "Fourth brother, you can help second brother say a few good words." "Is this?" "Ah, my dear." Lu Shi said, "Now that your father has left, leaving us mother and son in this world, we need to unite even more, don't we? You are still young now, and there are some things you don't understand. None of your uncles are Yu's generation. Your second uncle was just beaten by your father not long ago, so he will definitely hold a grudge in his heart. As for your fourth uncle, although he usually treats our mother and son well, now that your father is no longer here, people's hearts always change. Although your second brother is brother to you, he is of the same father and half mother, not born of a mother. If one of them inherits the throne, neither of us will have a good ending, my son, what do you think?" Zhu Yunwen also walked over and said, "Fourth brother, we are fellow mothers, blood is thicker than water. You must help me. When Grandpa Huang asks you again next time, you will say that second brother is the most suitable for being the crown prince, and now only." "Wana." LV Shi quickly scolded, and Zhu Yunwen then closed his mouth. Zhu Yungui was secretly surprised in his heart. He had already heard the implied meaning. When he had a conversation with Zhu Yuanzhang in the room that day, there was clearly no one else. How did Zhu Yunwen know what Zhu Yuanzhang had asked him? Zhu Yuanzhang definitely wouldn't say, "Is it because walls have ears?" Thinking of this, Zhu Yungui couldn't help but feel a chill on his body. He looked at his mother and second brother in surprise and said, "Mother, when I was talking to Grandpa Huang the other day, you..." Lu sighed and touched Zhu Yungui's hair with heartache. "Shao, I did let someone eavesdrop on my mother, but that was also a helpless move. You are still young, and my mother is afraid that you might say something wrong and make your grandfather angry. Don't hold any grudges against my mother." Zhu Yungui nodded. "This is understandable, after all, LV is a mother." He didn't say anything else. Zhu Yunwen felt that offending Zhu Yuanzhang by the Lu family might actually be a good thing. In this way, perhaps old Zhu would not appoint Zhu Yunwen as the crown prince, and there might also be no Jingnan battle. As for eavesdropping, it doesn't matter. Zhu Yuanzhang is not Emperor Wu of Han and will not kill his son or grandson. He values family ties very much and dotes on his future grandchildren. Even if you offend, it's just a slight punishment. If it weren't for his plan to make Zhu Di the crown prince, there wouldn't have been so much effort in front of old Zhu. That's the big deal. With this in mind, he tentatively asked Zhu Yunwen, "Second brother, this position of crown prince is a hot potato. Otherwise, we won't fight for it. How can that be done?" Zhu Yunwen immediately denied. Then his tone softened and he said, "Fourth brother, you're still young and don't understand at all. If second brother doesn't argue, we mother and son brothers will definitely not have a good life in the future." "Yeah, my dear." Lu Shi also said, "When you get older in the future, you will understand. My mother's choice is definitely not wrong. The choice was right, but the selection was wrong." Zhu Yunxian thought to himself, Zhu Yunwen is a person with high ambitions but low skills. He should not be the heir apparent and inherit the throne. Thinking of this, he looked at Zhu Yunwen and asked, "Second brother, even if you inherit the throne, what can you do? Can you really suppress those feudal lords stationed in various places and the proud soldiers and generals in the court?" Zhu Yunwen and LV Shi were both slightly stunned and looked over in astonishment. "Shower, you." Lu Shi looked at Zhu Yunxian incredulously and said, "Who told you these words?" "No one told the child, it's just that on the day my father left, the child understood a lot." Zhu Yunxian shook his head and said Lu didn't speak anymore, as if nodding with a hint of relief. At this moment, Zhu Yunwen spoke up and said, "Can't suppress it. No. After your second brother ascends the throne, I will immediately cut off the fiefdom. First, start with small ones, gradually devour them, and finally, the king of Yen. Looking at Zhu Yunwen's boastful words, Zhu Yunwen shook his head secretly in his heart. This cheap second brother is really hopeless. He is the kind of person who treats everyone like a fool and thinks he is the smartest. At this moment, he was enthusiastically talking about the matter of reducing the fiefdom. Little did they know that the Jingnan campaign in the original historical trajectory began with his conquest of the feudal domain starting from the small fiefdom and startling the snake with grass. Does he suspect that the king of Yen does not have time to prepare for rebellion in advance? How can such fear of hands and feet be achieved? Never let him become the crown prince. Otherwise, sooner or later someone would have taken the throne. I am also unlucky to follow suit. Just then, footsteps came from outside the door. Zhu Yunwen followed the sound and saw a servant from the mansion. The servant first respectfully bowed to a few people and then said, "There is someone in the palace who says they have been ordered to invite the fourth prince to study in the palace." End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Zhu Yuanzhang's Thoughts, Further Exploration. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Zhu Yuanzhang's Thoughts, Further Exploration. Mother, Grandpa Huang asked me to go to school. Zhu Yunwen breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. This can also be considered a relief. Lu Shi glanced outside and whispered, "Don't tell your grandfather what my mother said to you just now, do you understand?" Zhu Yunwen also said, "Fourth brother, remember to help second brother and talk to Grandpa Huang well. Don't contradict him." "I won't contradict Grandpa Huang," Zhu Yunwen said vaguely. Then he tidied up and went into the palace with the eunuch who came. "Mother, can fourth brother do it?" Zhu Yunwen asked as he looked at Zhu Yunchuan's back. Lu sighed and remained silent, her eyes somewhat complicated. When Zhu Yunwen arrived at the palace, old Zhu sat in his study, lost in thought. His expression was very bad, his face was tired, as if he had aged many years. White-haired people give black-haired people away. Zhu Biao's death dealt him a great blow. "Grandpa Huang, here you are." Seeing old Zhu like this, Zhu Yunxian took the initiative to greet him. Seeing Zhu Yunxian coming, Zhu Yuanzhang's face was adorned with a rare smile. "Hey, have you ever thought of Grandpa Huang?" Zhu Yunwen sighed inwardly. Perhaps this can be considered as thinking of people after seeing things. After adjusting his mindset, Zhu Yunwen took a step forward and took old Zhu's hand, saying, "Of course I did. Grandpa, don't be in a bad mood. From today on, I will be here with you." Ha ha ha. Old Zhu burst out laughing, but his voice carried a hint of desolation. All right. All right. Good grandson." He walked over and grabbed Zhu Yunchuan's hand, saying, "Don't rush to study yet. Let's go, Grandpa Huang will take you to eat delicious food." Zhu Yunxian smiled and said, "Thank you, Grandpa." Following Lao Zhu all the way to the garden, the stone table in the pavilion was already filled with delicious dishes. Zhu Yunwen was already prepared, and it couldn't help but brighten his eyes. Roast pig, roast squab, roast chicken, clear soup, so many delicious foods, each one is appetizing, and the fragrance is even more tempting. "How about it, do you like it?" Old Zhu's voice was like an old child. "Hi. I like it," Zhu Yunwen whispered, pretending to be a bit timid. Old Zhu bravely picked up Zhu Yunwen's hand and loudly said, "If you like it, have a good meal. Come on, Grandpa Huang will accompany you." "Okay." Zhu Yunxian was also polite. High places are unbearable to the cold. The higher one's position and power, the more they yearn for the fireworks of ordinary families. Zhu Yunwen no longer held back and sat on the stone bench happily eating. Zhu Yuanzhang sat on the side, but didn't move his chopsticks much. "Hey, is it delicious?" Zhu Yunwen's mouth was full of oil as he ate. "Thank you, Grandpa." Zhu Yuanzhang chuckled lightly and looked deeply into the distance, murmuring, "When Grandpa Huang was young, he always dreamed of having such a meal. At that time, the people were struggling to make a living, and it was hard. Even if they didn't starve to death, it would be good. Do you remember that year, Grandpa Huang dreamed of eating roasted chicken, and his face was covered in water, ha ha ha. Speaking of this, he sighed again and said, if Grandpa had a meal to eat back then, he wouldn't have rebelled. Zhu Yunwen put down his chopsticks and said, Grandpa Huang. It's okay, you eat your food, Zhu Yuanzhang chuckled. As he gets older, he always likes to reminisce about the past. Grandpa Huang, Zhu Yunxian looked up at the tall Zhu Yuanzhang and asked, do you have something to say to me? Zhu Yuanzhang was taken aback for a moment, then burst into laughter and said, you are truly the grandson of our old Zhu. You are so smart. Ah, my dear. Zhu Yuanzhang sighed, what Emperor wants to tell you is that if you don't go hungry like Emperor did in the past and want to stop these good things, you must guard the country well. With the rivers and mountains, there are these things. Guarding the Ming Dynasty's rivers and mountains is the responsibility of my descendants of the Zhu family, do you understand? After speaking, Zhu Yuanzhang's gaze turned to him. Zhu Yunxian quickly said, Grandpa, rest assured that when I grow up, I will definitely become a good courtier, offer advice and suggestions to the emperor, and protect the Ming Dynasty for generations to come. Zhu Yuanzhang was taken aback and said, be a good minister. Yeah. Why don't you want to sit on your own? After saying that, Zhu Yuanzhang stared at Zhu Yunxian. Zhu Yunwen let out a thud in his heart once again. He met Lao Zhu's gaze and said in a loud voice, I dare not have any ulterior motives, nor am I determined to do so. Zhu Yuanzhang said, even if you don't have any ulterior motives, you can't just offer advice and suggestions, can you? Are you going to work as a servant? The world of my Zhu family was shot from the back of a horse. Although Meng Yuan is driving away now, the world is still unclear, and the northern Yuan is still eyeing. How can you have such thoughts? Even if you don't become an emperor, lead troops to fight, suppress the northern Yuan dynasty, and establish an immortal reputation, isn't it good? Zhu Yunwen met Zhu Yuanzhang's gaze and said, that's not possible either. Zhu Yuanzhang raised his eyebrows slightly and asked, why not? Zhu Yunxian said, I am a royal relative and not suitable for wielding military power. I can only offer advice and suggestions. Grandpa Huang, have you forgotten that throughout dynasties, anyone with a clan in charge of military affairs would? In fact, at this time, the relatives of the Ming Dynasty were all in charge of troops. 9 Kings Frontier. But on the other hand, in reality, there aren't many soldiers and horses under the command of the 9 kings. The court also has various restrictions. There is a great difference from generals like Su De and Chang Yuchen who command troops. Zhu Yuanzhang waved his hand and impatiently interrupted, you child, why are you so unremarkable? Where else is there anything like us? He said angrily, you're so big, why don't you have any ambition? Grandpa Huang, I don't talk. Zhu Yuanzhang said, let's show you someone. After speaking, Zhu Yuanzhang glanced at the nearby guard and said, bring it up. Before long, a trembling eunuch with a pale face was pressed up. Zhu Yunwen felt that the eunuch looked familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen him before. Grandpa Huang, he is. Zhu Yuanzhang stood up and said, that day, when your father passed away, Grandpa Huang had a conversation with you in the room, and he was eavesdropping outside the door. Zhu Yunwen's heart was shaken. Unexpectedly, Lao Zhu directly pulled out the eunuch who was eavesdropping. What should this person do? Zhu Yuanzhang asked with a different meaning. Zhu Yunwen knew that he couldn't answer randomly at this moment, so he said, it's all up to the emperor's divine judgment. Zhu Yuanzhang nodded nonchalantly and said, drag it out and beat it to death in public with a stick. He spoke lightly, as if talking about a trivial matter. But the eunuch was already so frightened that he couldn't say a word and was dragged down. Zhu Yunwen couldn't help but shiver. After crossing over, he has always been a child and has not actually had much exposure to things. Only then did I realize the cruelty and ruthlessness of feudal society. Human life is like grass, not worth money. When the eunuch was dragged away, 2 more people remained in the pavilion. Zhu Yuanzhang sat back in his chair and asked, "Your Majesty, Grandpa has been thinking lately, who is better to appoint the crown prince? Can you answer Grandpa's question again? You must speak your heart." Zhu Yunwen chuckled inwardly. Lao Zhu is truly a human spirit. The reason why he ordered the eunuch to be killed just now was probably to scare himself. Is its purpose or is it to raise this question? Zhu Yunwen remembered what LV Shi and Zhu Yunwen had said to him earlier. He shook his head secretly. No way. Zhu Yunwen is absolutely not allowed to be the crown prince. Zhu Yungui's gaze was firm as he looked at old Zhu and said, "Grandpa, didn't you say that? I think 4th uncle is the most suitable." Oh. Old Zhu's eyes lit up. Do you still think your 4th uncle should be the crown prince? Zhu Yunxian nodded without explaining the reason, firmly saying, "Anyway, Shao thinks that no one is more suitable than 4th uncle to be the crown prince." Zhu Yuanzhang didn't say anything more, but took out a painting from his arms. "Grandpa, what is this?" Zhu Yunwen asked. "Come and see," Zhu Yuanzhang smiled. Zhu Yunwen leaned forward and only glanced at it, then immediately felt his scalp tingling and his hair standing upright. In that painting, it was a scene of him talking to LV's Zhu Yunwen in the room not long ago. The painter is very skilled, with just a few strokes, he is already lifelike. Even the expression of Zhu Yunwen eating was depicted. Zhu Yunwen was extremely shocked in his heart. Sure enough. Nothing can be hidden from Lao Zhu. End of this chapter. What are the real reasons hidden in the fog of history in Chapter 7? You are listening at novelfull.audio. What are the real reasons hidden in the fog of history in Chapter 7? A gust of wind blew by, and Zhu Yunxian couldn't help but feel a hint of coolness. But Zhu Yuanzhang still had that smiling expression. "Grandpa Huang, my mother and 3rd brother." Zhu Yuanzhang interrupted Zhu Yunxuan's words and said, "Grandpa Huang won't blame you. It's just that Grandpa Huang wants to ask you, why don't you listen to your mother and 2nd brother?" After speaking, Zhu Yuanzhang looked at Zhu Yunxian with a smile on his face. There was also a hint of smile in his eyes, but Zhu Yunwen couldn't see clearly or guess Zhu Yuanzhang's thoughts. "Shower, don't be afraid. You just need to answer Grandpa Huang's words," Zhu Yuanzhang comforted softly. The more he looked at Zhu Yuanzhang, the more he felt unfathomable. Another gust of wind raised his forehead and scattered hair fluttering before his eyes. "Because of filial piety," Zhu Yunwen said, "so my son cannot follow the words of his mother and 2nd brother." The so-called filial piety and fraternity refer to the love for parents and the friendship for siblings. Filial piety refers to filial piety and obedience towards parents, T refers to respecting and obeying one's older brother. Zhu Yuanzhang was slightly surprised and asked with a smile on his face, "Since it's because of filial piety, it's even more important to listen to your mother and brother. How could you turn it around?" Zhu Yunwen shook his head and said, "In my opinion, returning to Grandpa Huang's words is foolish filial piety, but it is actually unfilial." Oh. Old Zhu laughed and said, "Let's talk about it." Zhu Yunxian said, "If 2nd brother becomes emperor, with his abilities, he will not be able to control the courtiers and feudal lords. There will be even greater chaos. At that time, it was probably not just the 2nd brother who was affected. He couldn't sit steadily and the entire Ming Dynasty would be in turmoil. If my son obeys his mother and 2nd brother's words, he will be trapped in danger for them, and in danger for the Ming. I also apologized to my grandfather and my father under the 9 springs. This is truly unfilial piety. Now, although Shao has rebelled against her mother and 2nd brother, she is preventing something bad, which is the true filial piety. Ren Jun sits on the mountains and rivers, in charge of the country, with a responsibility that exceeds 1,000 pounds. It is not insignificant. Grandpa Huang asked me, my son should speak frankly about what he thinks in his heart, and he must not show favoritism towards the public for personal gain. His tone was firm, although his voice was childish, it was resounding. Okay. Zhu Yuanzhang's eyes sparkled with admiration as he exclaimed, you have such insight at a young age. You are truly the grandson of our old Zhu, haha. But in the next moment, Zhu Yuanzhang's expression dimmed a bit. If the leader Qianxia knew, he would definitely be proud of you. Seeing that Zhu Yuanzhang's emotions were not right, Zhu Yunwen quickly took his hand and said, Grandpa, Daddy has been buried. Don't be sad. Lao Zhu took a long breath, hesitating to speak, just staring at Zhu Yunxian in a daze. At this moment, a eunuch came to report, Your Majesty, Your Highness the King of Yen has arrived. Zhu Yuanzhang regained his senses and said, Let him come in. Yes. Zhu Di has been back for several days. He was originally defending against the Northern Yuan invasion in the north, but it was only after hearing the news of Zhu Biao's death that he was ordered to travel thousands of miles back. Previously, at Zhu Biao's funeral, Zhu Yunwen had already met Zhu Di. However, there were quite a few things at the time, and there wasn't much opportunity to talk privately. I didn't even see my appearance too clearly. I don't know why Zhu Di appeared here today. As Zhu Yunxian pondered, not far away came the sound of resounding footsteps. He looked up and carefully examined his fourth uncle. I saw him of medium height, with a chubby physique, a long beard, and a rather heroic expression. Perhaps due to being on the battlefield all year round, his skin was somewhat dark and rough. His eyes were shining with sharp and domineering radiance. Zhu Di walked step by step and respectfully called out, Dad, to old Zhu. Unlike other royal families, Lao Zhu walked step by step from the grassroots, so he never cared about the names of these royal families, without so much red tape. As long as it is not a formal court meeting, the son is also referred to as his father, not the father emperor. Lao Zhu nodded and said, Lao Si, here you are. Zhu Di nodded and looked over at Zhu Yunxian. Before Zhu Di could speak, Zhu Yunwen took the initiative to greet him and said, Hello fourth uncle. Zhu Di happily reached out his hand and touched Zhu Yunwen's head, saying with a smile, I haven't seen you for a few days, you stinky kid has grown taller again. Zhu Yunxian smiled proudly and said, That's right, my son needs to grow up quickly, and then we can go to the north to ride a big horse with fourth uncle. Zhu Di was taken aback for a moment, then burst into laughter. Okay, fourth uncle promises to take you to the north to ride horses, he said loudly. Unlike the other sons of Lao Zhu, Zhu Di has a very straightforward personality, with a touch of martial arts atmosphere. Fourth uncle, that's settled. Zhu Yunxian said happily, full of anticipation. It's settled. Zhu Di said, when fourth uncle pacifies the northern Yuan, he will take you on horseback to explore the entire northern Yuan. Oh. That's great. Zhu Yunwen jumped up and clapped his hands. It's great to have the fourth uncle guarding the mountains and rivers. Zhu Di was taken aback again, and then burst out laughing again. Lao Si, Zhu Yuanzhang said, haven't you eaten yet? Let's have some together. Zhu Di nodded. Add another pair of bowls and chopsticks, Zhu Yuanzhang said to the lower person, yes. At the dinner table, Zhu Yunxian didn't say much. But he was quietly observing Zhu Yuanzhang and Zhu Di. Lao Si, Zhu Yuanzhang picked up a piece of roasted goose and asked, what's going on in the north now? A gust of wind blew the wind chimes in the pavilion, and Zhu Yunwen perked up his ears and listened quietly. Zhu Di put down his chopsticks and said brightly, Dad, Beiyuan doesn't give up. He always wants to fight back, but he's all beaten back by me. Okay, Zhu Yuanzhang nodded in satisfaction. Zhu Di pushed the boat along the river and said, Dad, as long as there are enough troops and horses, I will definitely be able to conquer the entire northern Yuan dynasty in the future. A murderous aura condensed in Zhu Di's bright and spirited eyes, making Zhu Yunxian feel that the temperature around him had dropped a bit. Zhu Yuanzhang nodded and sighed. The northern Yuan dynasty was indeed a major concern for my Ming dynasty. Standing on the grassland, brave and skilled in battle, it is like a thorn in the throat and a thorn in the back. However, Zhu Yuanzhang did not say much about the deployment of troops. I can't tell what his thoughts are either. The two of them talked about other things about the northern Yuan dynasty. It was getting late and they had eaten almost everything. Zhu Di stood up and took his leave. Before leaving, Zhu Di turned to look at Zhu Yunxian and said happily, "Stinky kid, grow up quickly, and wait for fourth uncle to take you on horseback." Zhu Yunwen smiled excitedly and said, fourth uncle, that's settled. After Zhu Di left, the smile on Zhu Yuanzhang's face also narrowed a bit, and instead he wore a few strands of melancholy. "Grandpa Huang, what's wrong with you?" Zhu Yunxian asked. Zhu Yuanzhang hesitated for a moment and asked, "My dear, Grandpa Huang has another question for you." "Is it a question about the northern Yuan dynasty?" Zhu Yunwen replied hastily, "Smart." Zhu Yuanzhang nodded satisfactorily and said, "Grandpa Huang wants to ask you, if the Ming dynasty were to launch a large-scale northern expedition now, could it completely eliminate the northern Yuan dynasty?" Zhu Yunwen was stunned for a moment. Completely pacifying the northern Yuan dynasty is not an easy task. The Yuan army is mostly composed of mobile and agile cavalry, skilled in guerrilla warfare. If they advance recklessly, they may not be able to find the main force for decisive battles, but they may have to withdraw despite their efforts. At that time, Lan Yu led a 150,000-strong army to break through the northern Yuan royal family in the Fishing Sea, which was somewhat lucky. Just a little short, we couldn't find the location of the northern Yuan royal court, and the food was depleted, so we had to return to the Ming dynasty as our teacher. The north-south front is too long, thousands of kilometers long, and it is very difficult to supply food and grass. The third point is the inability to establish effective political power and rule on the grasslands. Even if they win for a while, they will revive after retreating. Not to mention the others, just these three are the difficulties. It's not difficult to defeat the northern Yuan dynasty, but if we want to completely eliminate it, it will be even more difficult. The Ming dynasty has never been able to resolve this matter. Otherwise, there would be no Qing army entering the border. Zhu Yunxian shook his head and said, "If a 100-legged insect dies without stiffening, I don't think it's possible." Zhu Yuanzhang nodded and said, "It's really not possible. You think your fourth uncle is suitable for the position of crown prince, but you just saw it. If your fourth uncle inherits the throne, he will definitely launch a massive campaign against the northern Yuan dynasty. The outcome is unknown, not to mention the cost of labor and wealth." Zhu Yunxian was momentarily stunned. In history, after Zhu Di ascended the throne, he launched several large-scale attacks against the northern Yuan dynasty. It seems that Lao Zhu had already guessed. And, judging from Lao Zhu's attitude, it seems that he doesn't want to launch a large-scale northern expedition. He conquered the world with his martial arts skills, but hoped that the next generation would engage in cultural governance. Suddenly, a light flashed in Zhu Yunwen's mind. Could it be that? This is the real reason why Lao Zhu is unwilling to let King Yan succeed to the throne. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Lifting the Ban on the Sea. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Lifting the ban on the sea in the blink of an eye, Zhu Yunxian thought of many things. In history, after Zhu Di succeeded to the throne, he went on several northern expeditions. We cannot say success, but we cannot say failure. In fact, there have been many achievements. The magnificent martial arts of Emperor Jianwen are beyond the reach of emperors after the Ming dynasty. However, it is certain that labor costs people money. And in the end, Zhu Di also died on his way back from the northern expedition. But now it seems that Zhu Yuanzhang hoped for the stability of the Ming Dynasty and the well-being of the people in the future. Lao Zhu is the emperor on horseback. Since ancient times, the succession of the throne has always been a matter of one generation of literature and one generation of martial arts. Only in this way can the country remain stable. Lao Zhu hopes that future generations can have the same cultural and scenic governance as the Han Dynasty, giving the world time to rest and recuperate. Wait until the national strength is strong enough before resolving the northern Yuan. But obviously, Zhu Di is a ruler of killing and attacking. If he ascends the throne and engages in military warfare, it is not what Lao Zhu wants to see. So, Lao Zhu did not allow Zhu Di to succeed, which is not all the reason, at least one of the important factors. Originally, Zhu Yunwen thought that Zhu Yuanzhang simply preferred Zhu Biao. Considering the relationship with Zhu Biao, he passed the throne to his grandson Zhu Yunwen. Many people in later generations also believe so. Now it seems that history is far from as simple as one imagines. The ancients only had limited horizons, but they were definitely not foolish. The true situation of many things is certainly very complex. Anyway, it's always better to have Zhu Di as the emperor than Zhu Yunwen. After all, the history of past lives is a lesson from the past. Moreover, even if old Zhu did not appoint Zhu Di as the crown prince, Zhu Di would still rebel and stage the Jingnan campaign. How could Zhu Yunwen, who is so muddy that he cannot support the wall, be able to compete with Zhu Di? It's better to make Zhu Di the crown prince. In history, Emperor Yongle had both merits and demerits. But he created the prosperous era of Yongle, organized the compilation of the Yongle Grand Ceremony, and ordered Zheng He to sail to the west. Overall, it can be called a generation-wise ruler. Zhu Yunwen looked at Lao Zhu on the side again and shook his head secretly. Judging from Zhu Yuanzhang's intentions, it is obvious that he does not support Zhu Di, and this matter can only be approached gradually. Zhu Yuanzhang asked with a smile, "Grandpa Huang, I have another question for you." Zhu Yunwen obediently said, Please speak up, Emperor." Zhu Yuanzhang asked, "If we follow your ideas, how can we pacify Mongolia?" Zhu Yuanzhang looked at Zhu Yunwen with a smile on his face. Outside the pavilion, the singing of birds can be heard. Zhu Yunwen shook his head with a look of grievance and said, "Grandpa, you are making things difficult for me. I am only so young, how can I know how to lead troops to fight?" Zhu Yuanzhang was taken aback for a moment, then smiled slightly awkwardly and said, "This question is not something you can answer. It's because Grandpa Huang has too high expectations of you." After thinking for a moment, Zhu Yunwen tilted his head and murmured, "However, there seems to be some way, but I don't know if it's right or wrong, good or bad." It was only when Grandpa Huang asked that Xiao suddenly remembered. "Oh." Old Zhu showed interest and waved his hand, "But it's okay to say so." Zhu Yunwen nodded and said, "Grandpa Huang asked how we can completely eradicate Mongolia. I feel that the problem is not with Mongolia, but with ourselves." Zhu Yuanzhang's eyes lit up and he smiled contentedly, "Keep talking." Zhu Yunwen said, "During the spring and autumn and warring states periods, the reason why Qin was able to sweep across the 6 states was not only because of its strong military strength and strong horses. It's also because of the accumulation of several generations and the strengths of Qin's weapons. Qiao Wei's pacification of Shu Han was not due to military forces. The scarcity of grain production in Shu Han is the real reason. So in my opinion, in order to truly pacify the northern Yuan dynasty, it is necessary to strengthen the Ming dynasty itself. Grain, weapons, scholars, farmers, and merchants, only by elevating these can the Ming dynasty become strong. Only in this way can the threat be eradicated." Zhu Yunwen looked at Zhu Yuanzhang with some embarrassment and said, "Grandpa, I'm foolish." "If you're wrong, Grandpa, don't be angry." She even shrank her neck as she spoke. Zhu Yuanzhang laughed heartily and said, "You're right. This is the foundation of a strong country." Zhu Yunxian felt Zhu Yuanzhang's rough hands caressing his hair. Zhu Yuanzhang smiled contentedly and said, "Just now, what you said was good. Although it's a cliché, it's not easy for you to have such insight at your age." Zhu Yunwen smiled obediently and said, "Hee, thank you for your praise, Grandpa Huang." In fact, he still has many ideas, but at this time he is only 7 years old and there are some things he cannot say. Being too demonic is not a good thing. Lao Zhu nodded as if teasing a child and said, "Hooer, just now you said about agriculture, commerce, and industry. How can we build a strong country with agriculture, commerce, and industry?" Zhu Yunxian hesitated for a moment. Zhu Yuanzhang said, "Just talk about it, it's okay." The afternoon weather was a bit hot and humid, surprisingly quiet. In the pool next to the pavilion, fish kept jumping out of the water, making a thud and diving into the bottom. Zhu Yunxian said, In my opinion, scholars, farmers, and merchants should start with commerce." "How to start?" Zhu Yuanzhang asked happily. Zhu Yunxian said, "Of course we will re-establish the commercial tax. The current commercial tax is too light." "Grandpa Huang, do you still remember Shenwan San?" Shenwan San, formerly known as Shenfu, was a wealthy merchant in the city of Nanjing. Zhu Yuanzhang built the city of Nanjing, and he can be said to be one of the heroes. It's just that this person likes to die and shamelessly pays tribute to the 3 armies for Zhu Yuanzhang. This can touch Lao Zhu's scales. The imperial power is supreme, and the 3 armies cannot be rewarded by a businessman on their behalf. In the end, due to various reasons, Shenwan San was exiled by Lao Zhu's family. Zhu Yuanzhang nodded and said, "What's wrong with Shenwan San?" Zhu Yunxian said, "Grandpa Huang, Shenwan San is just a businessman, but he can invest in building this city of Nanjing. Moreover, he dares to boast and reward the 3 armies for Grandpa Huang. Although this move is rebellious, it is not difficult to see that Shenwan San is wealthy, or in other words, merchants have a lot of money. But in reality, they pay very little tax. Grandpa Huang, I heard from my father that these merchants are all people who prioritize profit over righteousness. Didn't Shenwan San also support the enemies of Grandpa Huang back then? But later on, when the emperor's grandfather won the battle, Shenwan San became a scapegoat." Zhu Yunwen talked incessantly, but Zhu Yuanzhang didn't interrupt. He just looked at him with satisfaction, occasionally nodding with a smile. He couldn't see through Lao Zhu's thoughts for a moment. However, collecting commercial tax is easier said than done, and how to collect it is the big problem. Although Zhu Yunwen had many ideas in his heart, he could not only increase commercial tax revenue, but also further stimulate the development of the commodity economy in the Ming Dynasty while collecting taxes. But Lao Zhu didn't ask, of course he wouldn't say. Don't forget, he is still a child now, only 7 years old. Zhu Yuanzhang asked, "Did your father tell you all these things, or did you think of them yourself?" "Some are what my dad said, and some are what I saw in books," said Zhu Yunxian. Zhu Yuanzhang nodded. "There's one more thing that I dare not say." Zhu Yunxian said again. Zhu Yuanzhang waved his hand and said, "To be frank, Grandpa Huang won't be angry." Zhu Yunwen took a deep breath and said, "Grandpa Huang should not be banned by sea, but should send a ship out to sea." After saying these words, Zhu Yunwen immediately felt a slight decrease in temperature. The gaze that fell on him seemed to have a substantial change. A gust of wind blew by, and a hint of coolness couldn't help but emanate from my body. But in just an instant, it dissipated and disappeared. Zhu Yuanzhang still smiled and asked, "Why send a ship to sea?" End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Whales can't swallow it, then swallow it. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Whales can't swallow it, then swallow it. The ban on the sea was an order issued by Lao Zhu after the founding of the country. The board is not allowed to enter the sea. Due to the limitations of the times, Lao Zhu's approach can actually be understood. However, from the perspective of later generations, Zhu Yunwen believed that banning the sea was not a good choice. The era of great navigation is approaching, and the opening of maritime restrictions will bring huge benefits to the Ming Dynasty. But the truth behind this is both simple and complex. Is it easy to open up maritime bans? Pull one hair and move the whole body. Any national policy, whether good or bad, will always benefit someone. Changing it will infringe upon the interests of vested interests, and they will definitely oppose it. That's why, no matter how good the reform is, it always causes a lot of opposition and is always difficult to implement. Not to mention, this was personally ordered by Lao Zhu. It's not that easy to let him go. Zhu Yunwen's thoughts flew through his mind, quickly ruling out the idea of lecturing and analyzing the pros and cons with Lao Zhu now. He said, "Grandpa, I heard there is a crop in the West called sweet potatoes." Lao Zhu is non-committal about the issue of collecting commercial tax. But not expressing oneself is also an attitude. Zhu Yunwen no longer tried to persuade Lao Zhu from a commercial perspective, but started with agriculture. This is what Lao Zhu is most concerned about. Sweet potatoes. Zhu Yuanzhang frowned slightly. Yes, sweet potatoes. Zhu Yunxian said, this kind of thing can be used as food and is convenient for preservation and transportation. And it is very drought-resistant, with very low requirements for the environment and land. I heard that the yield is still very high. I think if this sweet potato plant were to be widely promoted in my land of enlightenment, it could raise millions of people. He talked endlessly, detailing the benefits of sweet potatoes. And this sweet potato is located in the western regions overseas, and can only be obtained by going out to sea. Zhu Yuanzhang's face changed and he suddenly stood up. But in just an instant, he returned to normal and sat back down. His face still had an expression that made it difficult to see his emotions clearly. "Grandpa, what's wrong with you?" Zhu Yunwen pretended to be afraid. It's okay, Zhu Yuanzhang smiled and waved his hand. After a moment's pause, he asked again, how did you know about this sweet potato? A few months ago, when I was playing outside with my second brother, I accidentally heard what a merchant from outside said, Zhu Yunwen said casually. Although Zhu Yuanzhang strictly prohibited the sea, Nanjing still had docks along the Yangtze River. There are also people and merchants who quietly come from afar, but the number is not large. Smuggling has been a recurring issue throughout the Ming Dynasty, from the beginning to the Longqing switch. The amount of silver in the Ming Dynasty is increasing, and most of it is produced overseas through trade. Not to mention, it was not until the 23rd year of the Hongwu reign, which was 2 years ago, that Zhu Yuanzhang completely banned foreign people from coming to the Ming Dynasty. Before this, it was always strictly forbidden for the people of the Ming Dynasty to go out to sea, but they couldn't help but come. Zhu Yuanzhang nodded, as if thinking of something, and then asked, "Did you and your second brother hear about it together?" "Yes, but my second brother doesn't seem to have much interest in these things, and I don't know if he heard them," said Zhu Yunxian with a heart movement. Zhu Yuanzhang looked at Zhu Yunxian thoughtfully, as if thinking about something. "Shao, the matter you mentioned will be carefully considered by the emperor." Zhu Yunwen nodded excitedly, like a child who had helped adults with things. But did not continue with this topic. Opening the sea ban is not a small matter, let alone making a decision based on rumors from a merchant. Now, it can only be a thought buried in Lao Zhu's heart. In later online novels, the protagonist casually utters a fleeting sentence to make the emperor change his national policy, treating both the emperor and the civil and military officials of the Manchu dynasty as fools. In his view, it is simply impossible. Zhu Yuanzhang's mood was obviously much better, and he reached out his hand to hold Zhu Yunwen in his arms. "If the sweet potato you mentioned really exists and solves the food problem, how should we pacify Mongolia?" he asked happily. Zhu Yuanzhang was always smiling, but there seemed to be a deeper meaning in his smile. After thinking for a moment, Zhu Yunxian said, "Grandpa, I believe that it is almost impossible to pacify Mongolia solely through military means." "Oh." Zhu Yuanzhang's eyes lit up and he looked at Zhu Yunxian with even greater satisfaction, saying, "Why do you say that?" Zhu Yunxian said, "Grandpa, I think military victory is always temporary. We can expel the Mongols from the Central Plains because it was originally our territory and not suitable for Mongol warfare. We can win them, but we cannot conquer them." Zhu Yuanzhang asked, "Why can't we conquer?" "Because they have their advantages," said Zhu Yunxian. "Mongolia is a nomadic people who are good at guerrilla warfare, and the entire grassland is their home ground. Beat and run, that's the hardest part. Our army cannot stay on the grassland all the time and cannot afford to consume it. And it is precisely because of this that the Mongols have confidence and fearlessness." "Grandpa Huang, are you right?" Zhu Yuanzhang let out a long sigh and said wearily, "Yes, what I said is all right. It is because the emperor was worried about these that he did not launch a large-scale military campaign." Zhu Yunwen tilted his head in thought for a moment before saying, "Grandpa, I have an idea that. I don't know if it's okay." Lao Zhu smiled and whispered, "What ideas can you have? Tell us what you want to hear." Zhu Yungui's gaze twitched slightly as he took Zhu Yuanzhang's hand and said in a childish voice, "I believe that there is only one way to completely conquer the northern Yuan dynasty, which is to establish a fiefdom." Gu Fan. Zhu Yunxian felt a slight tremor in Zhu Yuanzhang's broad palm. Zhu Yungui nodded and said, "It's about consolidating the feudal domain, defining pastoral areas, and preventing various tribes in Mongolia from wandering around. In this case, they can't guerrilla anymore. And I've heard that various tribes in Mongolia have inherent grievances, and as long as pastoral areas are designated, these tribes will restrict other tribes from entering. In this way, their nomadic range will become smaller. Being able to move within a very small range is equivalent to settling down like the Han people. Even if they are brave and skilled in battle, it will definitely be difficult for them to achieve success. Normally, my dad would show me the art of war, and I always understand the principles behind it. If the whale cannot swallow it, it will gradually erode it." Zhu Yunxian knew that during the Qing dynasty's rule several hundred years later, Mongolia had never had a favorable climate for many reasons. There are technological advancements, changes in the times, as well as the handling methods and meticulous calculations of the Qing dynasty. There are also some despicable means, which, as a child now, are not suitable to say. And delineating pastoral areas and preventing them from nomadic activities is already a very important reason, which is also suitable for him to say. Nomads cannot roam, just like big fish leaving deep water to come to shallow waters. Although they can still survive, they are just living a miserable life. And being in the shallows is all in the fisherman's bag. Although Zhu Yungui had no favorable impression of the Qing dynasty, he still highly recognized their approach. They are just bad, not stupid. They were originally tribes that came to dominate the Central Plains from outside the pass, and they have great experience in managing grassland tribes. Whales can't swallow it. So they gradually nibble on it. Zhu Yuanzhang's eyes lit up as he chewed on Zhu Yungui's words repeatedly. Even his expression changed. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Zhu Di's invitation. First time meeting the Prime Minister in black. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Zhu Di's invitation. First time meeting the Prime Minister in black. Define pastoral areas, award rewards to different tribes, and let them all stay in their own pastoral areas. If you run to someone else's pastoral area, you will naturally face opposition from other tribes. No need for the Ming Dynasty to send troops, we need to start fighting internally first. Once nomadic tribes have become settled nations, are they still scary? Can they still run away when Daming went on an expedition? And, this is Yang Mao. Even if they see it, they can't refuse. The grassland is already full of disputes. The method of using 2 peaches to kill 3 soldiers in the pastoral area itself. Daming's intervention in dividing pastoral areas is naturally reluctant for powerful tribes. But weak tribes are hard to come by. They will definitely stand on the side of Daming and support him. It's like having an ally from birth. Combined with the suppression of the Ming army and the suppression of the powerful tribes, they naturally had to be subdued. At this moment, Zhu Yuanzhang thought of many things. I originally thought that it would take many years of effort to pacify the northern Yuan dynasty and completely solve the hidden dangers of the grasslands. But if we follow Zhu Yunchuan's strategy, it won't take many years to solve it. And it's once and for all, with no future troubles. The divided pastoral areas have been passed down from generation to generation, and they are becoming increasingly divided from each other. There is no longer a possibility of unity in the grasslands, and they can only obey the commands of the Ming Dynasty. Not only will border troubles be permanently eliminated, but the entire grassland will also truly be incorporated into the territory of the Ming Dynasty. How did Zhu Yunwen, as a child, come up with such a clever strategy? Zhu Yuanzhang's face shifted from side to side, and even his breathing became heavy. Looking at Zhu Yunxian in his arms, he felt a bit incredulous. Is this really an idea that a 7-year-old child can come up with? Born to know, much wisdom is almost a demon. Why didn't you notice it before? Zhu Yunwen clearly also noticed Lao Zhu's loss of composure. I thought to myself, did you say too much? It's a bit out of line with a child's identity. He quickly spoke up and said, Grandpa, what's wrong? Zhu Yuanzhang finally regained his senses and instantly regained his composure. Hey, have you finished speaking? Zhu Yunwen nodded, his face seeming a bit embarrassed and said, Grandpa, these are all my own foolish opinions. If there is anything wrong, Grandpa, don't blame me. After all, Zhu Yuanzhang was accustomed to seeing strong winds and waves. After a brief shock, he had completely calmed down and was thinking about how to implement what Zhu Yunwen said, but on the surface, the depth was still unclear. He shook his head with a smile and touched the back of Zhu Yunchuan's head, saying, No, my dear. You said it very well, and even the emperor didn't expect many things. Really? Zhu Yunxian controlled his expression, looking proud. Really, Grandpa Huang never deceives people, Zhu Yuanzhang laughed. Does that person count as having grown up a bit? Grow up. Grow up. Ha ha ha. Zhu Yuanzhang laughed loudly, as if the haze had been swept away. My dear, Zhu Yuanzhang took down a jade pendant from his waist and said, This is a gift from Grandpa Huang to you. If you have any ideas in the future, boldly tell Grandpa Huang that even if you say it wrong, Grandpa Huang won't blame you. Thank you, Grandpa. Zhu Yunwen reached out to take the jade pendant, and as soon as he touched it, he felt a cool and refreshing feeling, which was refreshing. He held the jade pendant in both small hands and carefully examined it. The jade pendant is not large, pure white and flawless, crystal clear. Only half the size of a palm, it is a hollow circular shape. The jade pendant was carved by a craftsman into a lifelike dragon. Touching the jade pendant is like touching a coiled dragon. This thing is definitely not simple. Zhu Yunwen likes it more and more as he looks at it, but he still needs to be reserved. Grandpa, this is too valuable, I can't take it. Take it for you. Zhu Yuanzhang deliberately widened his eyes and said, We gave it to our grandson. What are you afraid of? Got it, Zhu Yunxian whispered. Zhu Yuanzhang nodded satisfactorily and said, Do you like it? I like it. Zhu Yuanzhang's expression softened a bit and he said with a smile, Grandpa Huang has assigned you a task. If you can complete it, Grandpa Huang will also give you other gifts. How about that? Zhu Yungui's heart twitched slightly and he asked, Grandpa Huang, what task is it? Zhu Yuanzhang chuckled and said, Just now, you didn't tell Grandpa that. That. Sweet potato, yes, sweet potato. Grandpa Huang wants you to find sweet potatoes, can you do it? Zhu Yuanzhang's tone seemed to be coaxing children, but Zhu Yunxian vaguely felt that there seemed to be other meanings in old Zhu's words. However, the matter of finding sweet potatoes, Grandpa Huang, that sweet potato is just hearsay. It's a bit difficult to find it. Besides, that thing is overseas and can only be found by sending a ship out to sea. Zhu Yuanzhang smiled and said, that's not necessarily true. Maybe some merchants have brought it. Just consider it as Grandpa Huang's test of you. Even if you can't find sweet potatoes, you still need to find the source of the news, that merchant. Got it, Grandpa Huang, I'll do my best. Zhu Yunwen secretly complained in his heart, how could there be any source of news? All of this was only known to him in later generations. Zhu Yunwen blamed himself for being talkative, but instead caused trouble for himself. However, Lao Zhu's attitude is quite subtle. Having a 7-year-old child do this seems to have other plans. As for where to find sweet potatoes, just take it slow. There are foreigners from afar in Nanjing, and perhaps as Lao Zhu said, they will bring sweet potatoes. It's getting late. Overall, today's harvest was quite good. At least Lao Zhu has already made a certain degree of improvement in certain people or things, which is not in vain. And I also learned about his attitude towards cheap fourth uncle Zhu Di. After bidding farewell to Zhu Yuanzhang, Zhu Yunwen walked out of the garden alone. Not long after walking out, I saw a little eunuch walking towards me. He didn't care. The eunuch saw the emperor and grandson coming over, quickly tied his hands and saluted, and Zhu Yunwen walked over. Unexpectedly, as he walked to the side, he heard the young eunuch whispering, "Fourth Emperor's son, Your Highness the Prince of Yan, please." Oh. Cheap fourth uncle. Zhu Yunwen's pupils slightly contracted. Is Zhu Di inviting himself over at this moment also for the purpose of establishing the crown prince? See, or not see? It seems difficult for younger generations to refuse invitations from elders. Lead the way ahead. Zhu Yunwen said calmly. Following the eunuch's twists and turns, I finally met Zhu Di in a remote part of the garden. This is a pavilion, and in the center of the pavilion is a stone table with a pot of tea on it. Zhu Di is tasting tea. Beside him stood a sturdy monk dressed in black. Zhu Yunwen immediately thought of a person. Dao Yan. That is to say, the famous black-clothed prime minister in later generations. This is a person with a mind close to a demon. He remained calm and continued to behave like a child, smiling as he approached and said, "Hello, fourth uncle." Zhu Di waved his hand casually and said boldly, "Here you are, sit down." At this moment, the black-clothed monk also approached respectfully and said, "Dao Yan, have seen the fourth emperor and grandson." Sure enough. This guy is Dao Yan. Fourth uncle, why is there still a master by your side? Zhu Yunxian asked curiously, without showing any signs. Zhu Di was taken aback for a moment, then smiled and said, "This is fourth uncle's friend." Oh, that's it. Zhu Yunwen nodded. At the moment of nodding, he saw a brief communication in the eyes of Zhu Di and Dao Yan. Zhu Di smiled and said, "Shower, after fourth uncle comes back, he doesn't have time to visit you at the mansion. Don't be angry with fourth uncle." How could that be? Zhu Yunxian immediately shook his head and said, "Fourth uncle is someone who does great things, and I wouldn't be so ignorant." Zhu Di's corner of the eye twitched slightly, although it was light, he still caught it. "I can't do anything big." "You're such a child," Zhu Di waved his hand casually. Zhu Yunwen shook his head and said, "Anyway, I think fourth uncle is someone who does great things. That's what I said to Grandpa Huang." "You child." Zhu Di shook his head helplessly, as if suddenly thinking of something, pretending to be carefree and saying, "By the way, I heard that your grandfather asked you about the establishment of a crown prince. The language was plain and the voice was not loud. At first, it seemed as if he was casually chatting. But in the ears of Zhu Yunxian, there was a thunderous sound. End of this chapter.